It is really worth playing games while rambling incoherently into the microphone. Why? Well, just because I can.
Originally, this room came directly after a long stretch of combat with antlions and opened up into more of the same. Players who opened the door were faced with another swarm, which they were expected to clear with a whole bunch of handy grenades. However, most playtesters were fairly tired of antlion combat at this point, so we decided that a complete break from antlions would be an even better alternative to blowing up more of them with grenades.
An eternity's repose. It brings peaceful thoughts, does it not?
I wasn't listening, unfortunately. But if you think this brings peaceful thoughts, then you are kinda weird, my alien friend. A bit of tease of the Guardian. Here.
The extract may not be unchallenging. The Guardian's presence guarantees an awareness of larval clusters. They are commonly posted near the young.
A glimpse of the Antlion Guardian in this level sets up anticipation for the more extended confrontation in upcoming areas. The player needs to know what he's getting into so that the Vortigaunt's warnings will all make sense.
Something here? No.
For most of this episode's development, there was a counterweight puzzle in this area, one the player had to solve while under attack by antlions. Although it was a clever puzzle, we felt the underground experience was already long enough, so we removed it and streamlined the path to the nectar. Having too many obstacles made it hard to keep up the sense that recovering the nectar was an urgent task.
We must try another direction. The extract roller is weaker here.
Okay. For some rounds. Because why not? Especially because it gives health, so. Where are they? Seem to have lost the health.
Pleasing sound and sensation.
Yeah, you're surprisingly pretty spot on. It's pretty satisfying to step on those grabs.
A wind from below bears the scent of extract. The stuff we seek lies at the bottom of this pit.
Okay.
This shaft connects to the chamber above, where my kin sustain the expanse. Once we have the extract, we can rejoin them quickly, provided we can restore.
Until we added the wooden landing here, players were very reluctant to jump down into the elevator shaft. Some playtesters went all the way back to the previous level looking for another way down. In the days of Half-Life 1, we depended on players jumping willy-nilly down every elevator shaft they encountered. But over the years, they've learned to be afraid of the things we tend to put down there.
Interesting.
Bravely, Gordon Freeman. When you reach the lower chamber, you must find a way to summon me.
Yeah, of course, because you can't jump that. It's a little bullshitty, but... I think this will break after a while.
Do not kill the Guardian, or the extract will be ruined.
Okay, and it's actually... There's a missing fan blade here, which can create sort of an opening for you to get through. Okay, I'm not sure if there's nothing here, so here I go. I was hesitant for a moment, but well, finally the flashlight is separate in batteries from the sprint and oxygen, which makes a lot more sense and is a lot less frustrating. Okay, that's pretty disgusting. And that was pretty underwhelming. That's a little better.
One of the major graphical enhancements we made to the source engine for Episode 2 was the addition of shadow mapping for the player's flashlight. This allows the flashlight to cast soft, dynamic shadows into the world, adding realism and drama to the scene, particularly in dark underground areas like this one, in which the use of the flashlight is required to navigate the space. As you move around, notice that all objects in the world cast and receive realistic shadows from the flashlight.
Okay.
Early versions of this area had serious problems. It was brutally punishing and unfun. We were trying to make an experience about timing and tension, but playtesters perceive this as another boss battle. But without physics and explosives, there's no way to kill the Guardian. They would empty all their ammunition into him and die horribly over and over before giving up and running away. They hated it. Our first solution to this problem was to add an arena immediately before the maze, where we hoped players would use up most of their ammo and on headcrabs and barnacles and not even try to shoot them. But clever players managed to lure the headcrabs into barnacles and rush past while the barnacles were feeding, arriving in the Guardian's lair with plenty of ammunition and again, the false impression that they could kill the boss. In the end, it was necessary to have the Vortigaunt tell the player, "Remember, do not kill the Guardian or the extract will be ruined," therefore justifying why you wouldn't be able to do what we didn't want you to do and what you couldn't do in the first place. This area is really fun now. The battle is almost exactly like the original layout. The big difference is that we're communicating our expectations to the player, rather than having them learn by dying.
Well, if I can't kill him, or it, then it isn't much of a battle. It's more of a more of an experience in running away. But still. Okay, I was here already, so I simply need to drop in there. I was a little hesitant to do that at first. There are those little corridors you can hide in. follow.
In Half-Life 2, the Antlion Guard was originally meant to be a sort of superbug bloodhound that pursued the player through caverns and harassed him while he slipped into small spaces to hide. While we never realized that design in Half-Life 2, this scenario is, for the most part, exactly what his original design sought to accomplish. Over the course of many years of production on various titles, we found that ideas often go away into the ether for years or more, only to resurface and thrive in a new game environment. Even failed prototypes can flourish down the road.
Before we simplified the path through the Guardian's lair, we allowed a right turn at this junction, leading the player right back to where they began. One of our playtesters continued to repeatedly turn right here for half an hour. That was a compelling argument for removing the maze-like elements.
Yeah, it may seem funny, but for me it isn't, because I've experienced stuff like that, going in circles for half an hour. Not in this game, but in general. In other games and in real life, I'm afraid as well, sometimes.
The antlion tunnels, carved out by worker antlions using their acid secretions, make up the third of 3 subterranean spaces with a distinctive visual style, man-made mines and natural cave formations being the other 2. The presence of crawl spaces was dictated by game design, but they evolved into chambers that fit logically within the life cycle of the antlions. Here, the young grubs can develop and feed in safety, although, conveniently for the player, they cannot digest useful items such as health kits.
Okay, there is another tunnel in here.
One change we made to Episode 2 was to decouple the flashlight power from the suit power.
Yeah.
Playtesters constantly had their flashlight on during the guard chase sequence and were unable to sprint to safety because the flashlight drained their suit's sprint ability. We wanted players to be able to outrun the Guardian with their flashlight shining. Sometimes we are forced to make trade-offs between conventions we've established in earlier installments and gameplay we need now. It would be silly to not have cool-looking underground passages just to keep flashlight behavior consistent until the end of time. As for the rationale within the story, players might assume this new feature was apparently the result of damage sustained in the train crash.
Well, it doesn't make sense because it's actually an upgrade. Not a downgrade, but I don't mind. It's a reasonable change. And it annoyed me in the first place, in the first game, so... Okay, I must have been here, of course, because of this. Yeah, I also was here, so now I'm starting to go in circles, so I need to get my bearings. Whoa. Obviously, wasn't here because...
In earlier versions of this map, the tunnels here were more maze-like, with branches, loopbacks, and dead ends. After watching numerous playtesters get lost, it became obvious that they were not having fun. We simplified the paths and added a number of one-way choke points. The curving tunnels still keep the player in suspense, but as long as he keeps moving, he'll continue to progress, with very little time wasted in retracing steps.
Yeah, I'm thankful for that change, because I can't imagine myself actually, sadly enough, I can't imagine myself going in circles. In fact, I'm a little afraid that I'm doing exactly that at the moment, although... Oh, it was close. At least I know where to go now. Okay, that was... Interesting.
Levels detected. Warning. Vital signs critical. Vital signs are dropping.
I know where to go. So basically, okay, that didn't want that to happen. Okay, it's here. I wanted to listen to that commentary note. Get back. Will he? I'm not certain. Maybe he won't. Oh damn it. I missed one up there.
In early versions of this map, the player was allowed to drop straight to the bottom of the shaft. Nobody ever saw the Guardian break through the boards. Therefore, we added a small floor area and required the player to turn around to break more boards, making it much likelier that players would see the Guardian's attack.
Yeah, but instead I missed the commentary there. Save. Okay, I think there are no obvious enemies around here. It's more of a puzzle stage then.
One of our toughest jobs is tuning for difficulty. There are all kinds of ways that sloppy game design can make players miserable when they're supposed to be enjoying themselves. If the player is laughing as he dies, it's a good sign. It means the death is perceived as part of the entertainment experience, that the player died fairly and not as a result of poor design. But if the playtester is beating his head on the keyboard, we usually take this as a sign that there's still work to be done.
At various times in development, this gear was loose in the environment, tucked in a dark crevice, hidden in a small box, or lost in the bottom of a flooded pool. One playtester, unaware of his low health, actually drowned in 2 feet of water while retrieving the gear. We realized that attaching the gear to a chassis identical to the engine motor was the best way to help the player make the connection between this gear and the empty space on the other assembly.
Okay, now I need to probably take out the...
I sense the Freeman down below. The elevator that we may reconvene.
This puzzle proved surprisingly difficult for many players. In an earlier version, not only did you need to find the spare gear, but this elevator was connected to a disabled generator that wouldn't operate until you also attached a crank and jump-started it with the gravity gun. Although it sounds simple, most playtesters got stuck here for many minutes. We kept simplifying until we hit the version you see here.
I descend. Abide a moment longer, that we may proceed together. Freeman has done his task magnificently.
Okay,
The
then come on.
scent of ride perfection beckons. Follow thy traffic source. You have done the hardest work, omitting entrance to this chamber. Truly, the life of Alex Vance is in able hands.
Yeah, sure. Come on. Okay, I will activate the commentary from the distance because I don't really remember what happens afterwards and if I need to flee afterwards quickly.
We had wanted to implement a generalized particle system for quite some time, and after episode 1 we set out to create one. In previous Half-Life games, each effect had been hand-coded by a programmer working with an artist. It was effective, but not easily scalable. Our new system drew upon the aspects we found most useful from team members who had worked with both real-time systems in games and offline renderers for movies such as The Lord of the Rings. The results were an artist-friendly, modular, component-driven system. Each system can have renderers which display the particle in some form, initializers which set up certain properties of the particle, operators which carry out actions upon the particle each frame, constraints which provide movement limitations such as collision, forces which impart complex dynamics, and emitters which determine how each new particle is created. Together they are plugged into a system as needed to be as lightweight or as complex as required for the effect. Each individual component is simple, but when combined can create rather complex dynamics. Furthermore, adding additional components to support the specific needs of a game or a mod is easily done. The results can be seen in everything ranging from the simple glows of the larval extract here, to the citadel effects, blood, smoke, hunter effects, portal effects, fire, and so forth. Dynamic effects are now in the hands of the artists, who can use them to create whatever is needed, from unique one-offs in specific levels, to generalized effects for gameplay.
When the Vortigant discovers the extract, we wanted to do something to distinguish the nectar from all the other glowy alien substances that we've seen in the caves so far. Therefore, we had him perform a bit of a chant and had the extract give off a show of its own.
Such quantities of larvae, such a heady aroma. Tur, langer, gun. Excellent. A bounty of larval extract. This should only take a moment. Secretions of the finest quality. Let us return now to the expanse.
It has a really cool lighting effect on his face, especially in a moment when he stands in the dark elevator.
Truly, Freeman, well done. You bear some traits we thought innate to Vortigine. Antlion husbandry was once our ancestral practice. The creatures exude many valuable compounds. The extract is the most prized by far. It dissolves the false veils that divide the vortessence. All this you shall witness when...
One of the three main themes for antline areas, the mines were a plausible setting for light sources.
Oh, it cut off. I'm not sure why, because...
Stop! She ebbs! If we lose her, we lose all! Behold! The extract! Miraculous secretion. Make haste! Join now as we imbibe the extract. Yes. A human is needed. Agreed. Join us, Freeman. We weave the Freeman's life with hers. Yes, there is a quickening. Almost mortal, this bond between you.
I remember when I first played, when I was still quite in the early teens, when the episode 2 came out, this effect really creeped me out a little.
Dr. Freeman, I realize this moment may not be the most convenient for a heart-to-heart, but I had to wait until your friends were otherwise occupied. There was a time they cared nothing for Miss Vance, when their only experience of humanity was a crowbar coming at them down a steel corridor. When I plucked her from Black Mesa, I acted in the face of objections that she was a mere child and of no practical use to anyone. I have learned to ignore such naysayers when quelling them was out of the question. Still, I am not one to squander my investments, and I remain confident she was worth far more than the initial appraisal. That's why I must now extract from you some small repayment owed for your own survival. See her safely to White Forest, Dr. Freeman. I wish I could do more than keep an eye on you, but I have agreed to abide by certain restrictions. Well, now, listen carefully, my dear. When you see your father, relay these words. Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
Yeah, the G-Man is a really great and mysterious character, and I'm rather sad that we may never find out, the conclusion of the story in the end.
Oh God.
Because probably nobody believes that Half-Life 3 will ever come out at this point.
I thought for sure I was dead.
The Combine hunters caused traumatic injury.
A hunter. So that's what it was.
We knit shattered bone and restored circulatory integrity. Yet it was a free man who retrieved your vortessence.
Yeah, that's Gordon. How long have I been out?
A matter of hours.
Hours? We've got to get moving.
A moment longer.
But we have to get to White Forest. It's vital.
No fear. We will put you on the right road. Now, try carefully to rise.
Whoa. I don't know what you did, but I have a feeling I'm lucky to be here.
Come then. I will get you on the path to White Forest.
Okay, but I will listen to those comments first.
We sometimes use sounds to set a mood rather than to literally underscore the on-screen action. The G-Man sequence you just saw, for example, relies heavily on the use of abstract and ambient sounds. We wanted the soundscape to have a deadened, internalized quality that you get from putting your hands over your ears. So we started with recordings from inside the womb. If you listen closely, you can hear the internal gurgling noises as well as muffled heartbeats. We then added various other effects around the rhythm of the heartbeat, plus long-tailed reverbs. None of the door or transition effects are literal interpretations, but are obscure metal and feedback sounds created to work in sync with the observable actions. So all of these things contribute to the scene's dreamlike quality.
One of the most significant story meanings we had near the beginning of episode 2 concerned how much we were going to reveal about the G-Man. Once we'd decided exactly how much to explain, we had to come up with a way of revealing it. Alex's healing sequence offered the perfect way to pull Gordon out of mundane surroundings and put him in a realm where the G-Man can speak to him directly, but dialogue is only one of our tools for narrative. By blending images from the past, the present, and the immediate future, we continue to stitch together the Half-Life story over time. We make clear that the events at Black Mesa continue to resonate, and we draw the strongest connections yet between Gordon, the G-Man, and Alex and Eli Vance.
Farewell. Go safe. Travel well.
Good luck out there. Okay, Freeman. Be adequate. What the hell does that mean? I don't know. Sounds like something the Forts would say.
I think I can walk on my own now. Let me give it a shot. Yeah. Stiff, but I think I'm okay. I really consider working on Alex my acting school because
It has stretched me. It has made me go deeper in my work. It's sharpened me up as far as being able to call in emotions or really just imagination. A creative spirit is really just a lot of imagination, I think. And afterwards, I always seem to be sharper in everything I do. I always have a good show at night, or I always go on to the next job with a heightened awareness or a heightened presence. And it's only helped me, so thank you, Alex,
if it tries to hinder our progress, we'll have no choice but to kill it.
You messed with its eggs? Oh, no wonder it's mad.
Oh, she has a small cut on her.
That is all we can. Can we be of service?
That was quite tight. I wasn't expecting that, so thank you for the gesture at least. Okay, it's poisoned headcrab, I think. Now I don't really get the significance of the chapter name, because Pontifex is, well, it used to be a Latin word for priest. They had the high priests of Rome were called Pontifex Maximus, but it also literally means bridge builder, and also it's to make it a little more confusing. It's also used currently by the Pope. Maybe it relates somehow to this bridge over here, but I'm not sure how the Freeman is the bridge builder in this chapter, so much less the Pope anyway.
In this vista, we release the player from the confines of the subterranean world and thrust them into a vast open space on a scale rarely seen in our previous games. The narrative takes advantage of this scale as well. With our allies at close range and our enemy is on the distant bridge, we are reminded of the personal stakes and the larger threat, all in one short scene.
All autonomous units.
Oh my god.
Accept mandatory sector
The Combine's on the
installation.
move.
Yes, and they carry Shu'ulafloy, a visor still in incubation pods. They gather and unite the scattered Combine forces.
So that's what we saw in the Citadel. They're sure in a hurry.
They move north with great purpose.
North? White Forest. We have to get there ahead of them.
I know of humans with a vehicle not far from here. They will understand our urgent need.
What are we waiting for?
Well, I will listen to all the commentary notes here, and this will be a good place to end the episode then.
We tried several different ways of showing the advisor traveling with the Combine forces. We started off with an advisor pod flying over the troops, much as they flew from the Citadel at the end of Episode 1. However, we didn't want to give the impression that those pods were anything but emergency escape units. They were not meant to be self-powered flying crafts that could be piloted around in future episodes. We ended up with the solution you see here. APCs are pulling a structure holding an inert advisor pod. This lets the player study the advisors at different points in their life cycle. They see the main stages of the advisor's metamorphosis, from harmless larvae into powerful and highly mobile monsters.
Yeah, I don't think I can shoot them.
Sometimes very small changes can make a big difference. Originally, these troops all marched in lockstep, using the same walk animation. This looked extremely robotic. We took a second walk animation that had been done for this troop skeleton, a more upright, casual walk, and programmed each soldier to randomly blend between the two walk cycles as he crossed the bridge. This 30-minute change made a huge difference in the scene.
And the last one here.
Most of our dramatic scenes are constrained in such a way that the player can't progress until the scene is over. For example, there might be a gate that only Alex or a Vortigaunt can open. In this scene, where the Vortigaunt and Alex first see the Combine marching on White Forest, we simply placed a few barrels to block the way while Alex and the Vortigaunt speak. With just this slight impediment, every playtester stayed and watched the scene as intended, so no explicit gate was needed.
Okay, so that is all for this episode. see you in the next one. Bye.